Have you ever wondered why some people with less money seem more financially secure than people with way more? Like, you'd think someone retiring with $1.5 million would be sleeping peacefully at night, while someone with only 800,000 would be stressed out of their mind. But here's what actually happens in the real world, and this is going to completely change how you think about retirement planning. There are retirees sitting on $800,000 who feel absolutely bulletproof about their financial future, while others with nearly double that amount are losing sleep worrying about running out of money. This isn't some weird paradox or optical illusion. There are specific, identifiable reasons why the person with less can feel more secure than the person with more, and understanding these reasons might be the most important retirement lesson you ever learn. The difference between these two groups has almost nothing to do with the actual dollar amounts in their accounts. What separates them is their relationship with money, their spending habits, their lifestyle expectations, and most importantly, their understanding of what actually creates financial security in retirement. The $1.5 million retiree who's stressed is making critical mistakes that the $800,000 retiree has avoided, and those mistakes are costing them peace of mind despite having an extra $700,000 in the bank. This isn't about being lucky or unlucky. This is about making fundamentally different choices about how to approach retirement, and the outcomes are so dramatically different that they're worth studying in detail. Let's start with the most obvious difference between these two groups, and it's their cost of living. The $800,000 retiree who feels secure has structured their entire retirement around living on $35,000 to $40,000 per year. They own their home outright, they live in a low-cost area, they've eliminated debt, and they've right-sized their lifestyle to match their resources. Using the common 4% withdrawal rule, $800,000 generates $32,000 per year. Add in Social Security of maybe $25,000 annually, and they've got $57,000 in total annual income. They're spending $40,000 and banking the extra $17,000 as a cushion for unexpected expenses or market downturns. They're not just covering their expenses, they're exceeding them comfortably, and that surplus creates an incredible sense of financial security. Now look at the $1.5 million retiree who's stressed. They're trying to maintain a lifestyle that costs $80,000 to $90,000 per year. At 4% withdrawal, their nest egg generates $60,000 annually. Add the same $25,000 from Social Security, and they've got $85,000 in total income. They're spending right up to the edge of what they're bringing in, with almost no cushion for the unexpected. Every year, they have to withdraw the maximum safe amount just to maintain their current lifestyle. One major unexpected expense or a bad year in the market, and they're potentially topping into principal at an unsustainable rate. Despite having nearly double the assets, they feel financially precarious because their spending is constantly pushing against their income limits. This spending difference didn't happen by accident. It's the result of fundamentally different decisions about where to live and how to live. The $800,000 retiree probably made some tough calls that the $1.5 million retiree wasn't willing to make. They might have left an expensive city where they raised their family and moved to a more affordable area. They downsized from a 2,500 square foot house to a 1,400 square foot home. They traded proximity to expensive restaurants and entertainment for a quieter life in a place where a nice dinner out costs $40 instead of $120. These weren't sacrifices that made them miserable, they were strategic choices that gave them financial breathing room. The $1.5 million retiree, on the other hand, probably refused to make these adjustments. They stayed in the expensive area where they've always lived because that's where their friends are. They kept the big house because they want space for when the grandkids visit, even though that happens maybe 4 times a year. They maintained a lifestyle centered around spending because that's what they've always done, and they don't want retirement to feel like a downgrade. This refusal to adjust to their new financial reality is what creates the anxiety. They've got more money, but they're also committed to spending more money, and that spending commitment is what destroys their sense of security. The second major difference is debt. The $800,000 retiree who feels secure entered retirement completely debt-free. No mortgage, no car payments, no credit card balances, nothing.
Their $40,000 annual budget goes toward actual living expenses, not servicing debt from past purchases. This debt-free status means they have maximum flexibility. If the market crashes and their portfolio drops 30%, they can easily cut their spending by 20% for a year or two without it feeling like a crisis, because they're not locked into debt payments. Their fixed costs are incredibly low, giving them options when things get tough.
The $1.5 million retiree who's stressed probably still has debt eating into their budget. Maybe they've got 5 years left on their mortgage at $1,800 per month. Maybe they're making payments on a newer car. Maybe they're carrying some credit card debt from overspending in the years leading up to retirement. That debt service might consume $25,000 to $30,000 of their annual budget, money that disappears before they even think about groceries or utilities. This debt reduces their flexibility dramatically. When you've got debt payments that must be made regardless of market conditions or unexpected expenses, you've handcuffed yourself financially. The irony is that the person with more assets feels less secure because a bigger chunk of those assets is already spoken for by debt obligations. The third difference is housing costs, and this deserves its own discussion because it's so critical. The $800,000 retiree owns their home free and clear, and they specifically chose a home in an area with low property taxes and reasonable insurance costs. Their total housing expenses might be $8,000 to $10,000 per year for property taxes, insurance, utilities, and maintenance. That's less than $900 per month for their biggest expense category. They're living in a nice home in a safe neighborhood, but they're not trying to impress anyone with the McMansion in the fanciest zip code. Their home is comfortable and functional, and most importantly, it's not eating up their retirement budget. The $1.5 million retiree still has housing costs that would make your eyes water. Maybe they've got a remaining mortgage balance, or even if the house is paid off, they're in an area where property taxes alone are $12,000 to $15,000 per year. Add homeowners insurance in a high-cost area, higher utilities for a bigger home, and maintenance costs that scale with home size, and they might be spending $30,000 to $40,000 annually just on housing. That's almost as much as the entire annual budget of the $800,000 retiree. Nearly half their retirement spending is going to keeping a roof over their head, and that's before they've bought a single gallon of milk or paid for any kind of entertainment or travel. This housing cost difference compounds over a 30-year retirement into absolutely staggering numbers. The $800,000 retiree spending $10,000 annually on housing will spend $300,000 over 30 years. The $1.5 million retiree spending $35,000 annually will spend over $1 million on housing. Think about that. The person with less money will spend $700,000 less on housing over their retirement, which means they have that money available for everything else, or as a buffer against the unexpected. The person with more money is pouring $1 million into housing costs alone, and they wonder why they feel financially stretched despite their bigger nest egg.
The fourth major difference is lifestyle expectations and what retirement actually looks like day to day. The $800,000 retiree has embraced a retirement lifestyle focused on low-cost and free activities. They're hiking, visiting state parks, reading library books, volunteering, spending time with friends and family, gardening, and pursuing hobbies that don't require constant spending. They might take one nice vacation per year, but mostly they've built a life they enjoy that doesn't depend on opening their wallet every time they want to do something fun. Their identity and happiness aren't tied to consumption. They've discovered that retirement satisfaction comes from how you spend your time, not how much money you spend. The $1.5 million retiree is trying to fund a retirement that looks like an extended vacation. They want to travel internationally multiple times per year. They want to eat at nice restaurants several times a week. They want to belong to country clubs and maintain expensive hobbies like golf or boating. They're trying to live like they see in retirement advertising, where impossibly fit seniors are perpetually on some adventure that requires spending money. This consumption-based retirement is expensive to maintain, and it's what's causing the anxiety despite having a bigger portfolio. They've built an identity around a certain lifestyle, and that lifestyle costs $90,000 a year to maintain. Here's what's fascinating about this difference. Research consistently shows that life satisfaction in retirement correlates very weakly with spending level once you're above the poverty line. Retirees spending $40,000 a year report similar happiness levels to retirees spending $80,000 a year. The things that actually drive retirement satisfaction are health, social connections, sense of purpose, and autonomy over your time.
None of these require substantial spending. But the $1.5 million retiree hasn't learned this lesson. They're still operating under the assumption that spending equals happiness, and they're burning through money trying to buy a satisfaction that was available for free all along. The fifth difference is their approach to healthcare costs, which is one of the biggest wildcards in retirement planning. The $800,000 retiree has been strategic about managing these costs. They enrolled in Medicare at 65, they shopped carefully for a Medicare supplement plan or Medicare Advantage plan that fits their needs and budget, and they're using generic medications whenever possible. They chose doctors who accept Medicare assignment, avoiding surprise bills. They're proactive about preventative care and staying healthy because they know that's the best way to control healthcare costs long term. Their annual healthcare costs might run $8,000 to $12,000, including premiums, out-of-pocket costs, and prescriptions. It's a significant expense, but it's predictable and manageable.
The $1.5 million retiree is spending way more on healthcare, often unnecessarily. Maybe they kept a more expensive Medicare supplement plan because they didn't want to bother shopping around. Maybe they're using brand-name drugs when generics would work just as well because their doctor prescribed the brand and they didn't ask about alternatives. Maybe they're seeing specialists who don't accept Medicare assignment, leading to higher out-of-pocket costs. They might be spending $15,000 to $20,000 annually on healthcare, and some of that extra spending is buying them very little additional value. They're paying more partly because they can afford to, but that higher spending is eating into their budget without necessarily improving their health outcomes. The sixth critical difference is their relationship with market volatility and sequence of returns risk. The $800,000 retiree understands that they're living on a tight margin, so they've positioned their portfolio conservatively. Maybe they're 50% stocks and 50% bonds, or even 40% stocks and 60% bonds. They're not trying to maximize returns. They're trying to minimize the chance of a catastrophic loss early in retirement that would destroy their plan. They've also built in multiple years of expenses in cash and bonds, so they can avoid selling stocks during a downturn. If the market crashes, they can live off their safe assets for 3 or 4 years while stocks recover, never forcing themselves to sell at a loss. This conservative approach might mean they earn slightly lower returns over the long run, but it also means they sleep well at night. They're not checking their account balance daily and panicking when the market drops. They've structured their finances to weather any realistic market scenario, and that structure provides enormous peace of mind. They understand that preserving capital is more important than maximizing returns when you're living off your investments. The $1.5 million retiree, despite having more money, often takes more risk because they feel like they need higher returns to maintain their spending level. Maybe there's 70% stocks and 30% bonds, trying to squeeze out an extra % or 2 of annual returns. This works great when markets are going up, but it's a disaster when markets crash early in their retirement. This is called sequence of returns risk, and it's one of the most dangerous threats to retirement security. If you retire and the market immediately drops 40% and you're forced to sell stocks at depressed prices to fund your lifestyle, you can permanently damage your portfolio's ability to recover. The math on this is brutal. 2 retirees both start with $1.5 million and withdraw $60,000 annually. One retires right before a market boom and sees great returns for the first 10 years. The other retires right before a market crash and experiences terrible returns for the first 10 years. Even if both experience the exact same average returns over 30 years, just in different order, the one who experienced bad returns early might run out of money while the one who experienced good returns early ends up with money left over. Same starting amount, same average returns, completely different outcomes based solely on the sequence of when those returns occurred. The $1.5 million retiree taking more risk is potentially exposed to this sequence risk in a way that could destroy their retirement despite their larger starting balance. The seventh difference is tax planning and efficiency. The $800,000 retiree has been strategic about the types of accounts they have and how they withdraw money. They probably have a mix of traditional pre-tax retirement accounts, Roth accounts, and maybe some taxable brokerage accounts. This gives them flexibility to manage their tax liability in retirement. They can withdraw from traditional accounts up to the top of a low tax bracket, then switch to Roth withdrawals, which are tax-free, keeping their overall tax bill minimal. They might pay only $2,000 to $4,000 in federal taxes on their $40,000 in spending because they've been smart about where that money comes from.
The $1.5 million retiree often has most or all their money in traditional pre-tax accounts like 401ks and traditional IRAs. This means every dollar they withdraw is fully taxable as ordinary income. When they pull out $60,000 to fund their lifestyle, they might actually need to withdraw $75,000 or $80,000 to cover the taxes on that withdrawal. They're losing $15,000 to $20,000 annually to taxes that better planning could have minimized. Over a 30-year retirement, that's $450,000 to $600,000 paid in taxes that could have been avoided or reduced through better account diversification and withdrawal strategies. This tax inefficiency means the $1.5 million retiree isn't really starting with $1.5 million. After accounting for the taxes they'll owe on withdrawals, their effective nest egg is more like $1.1 or $1.2 million. Suddenly, that big advantage over the $800,000 retiree doesn't look so big anymore. And because they haven't done this analysis, they don't realize they're not as well off as they think they are. They're operating under the illusion that they have $1.5 million available to fund their retirement, when the reality is that Uncle Sam is a silent partner who's going to take a huge cut of every withdrawal.
The eighth difference is emergency preparedness and financial buffers. The $800,000 retiree who feels secure has built multiple layers of protection into their plan. They keep 1 to 2 years of expenses in a high-yield savings account. They have a home equity line of credit available but unused as a backup emergency fund. They maintain their home proactively, replacing the roof before it starts leaking and the HVAC before it dies, avoiding those catastrophic, unexpected expenses. They have adequate insurance coverage for home, auto, health, and maybe even long-term care. They've thought through what could go wrong and they've prepared for it. This preparation means when something unexpected happens, and it always does, they handle it calmly without derailing their financial plan. The car needs replacing earlier than expected, they've got cash set aside for that. Medical expenses spike one year, they've got room in the budget to absorb it. The market crashes, they've got years of expenses in safe assets and they don't need to panic sell. Every potential crisis has been anticipated and planned for, which creates enormous confidence that they can handle whatever comes their way. The $1.5 million retiree often has very little in the way of financial buffers despite having way more total assets. Maybe they've got 3 months of expenses in cash and the rest is fully invested because they wanted to maximize returns. They don't have insurance coverage that matches their asset level because they didn't want to pay the premiums. They've deferred home maintenance to save money, setting themselves up for expensive emergency repairs. When something goes wrong, it feels like a crisis because they haven't prepared for it. They have to scramble to come up with cash, maybe selling investments at the wrong time or going into debt to cover the expense. This lack of preparation, despite having more resources, creates constant low-level anxiety. Every weird noise the car makes triggers worry about replacement costs. Every ache and pain raises concerns about medical bills. They're living in a reactive mode, responding to problems as they arise rather than proactively preventing them. The smaller nest egg retiree who planned ahead feels more secure than the larger nest egg retiree who's flying by the seat of their pants.
The ninth major difference is social comparison and keeping up appearances. The $800,000 retiree has let go of caring what other people think about their financial status. They're not trying to impress anyone with their car or their house or their vacation photos on social media. They're comfortable telling friends they can't afford expensive group trips or pricey dinners out. They've surrounded themselves with people who share similar values around money, and they don't feel pressure to spend to maintain status. This freedom from social pressure means they can make financial decisions based purely on what's right for their situation, not on what will look good to others. The $1.5 million retiree is often trapped by the need to maintain appearances. They're worried about what their friends and neighbors think. They don't want to be the person who can't afford to join the group trip to Europe or who drives a car that's 10 years old. They're still keeping up with the Joneses in retirement, even though the Joneses are probably secretly broke and stressed about money too. This social pressure drives spending decisions that don't align with their actual financial security. They're spending money to impress people they don't even particularly like, and it's costing them their peace of mind. The 10th and final difference is their understanding of what enough actually means. The $800,000 retiree has figured out what's actually important to them and what brings genuine satisfaction to their life. They know that experiences matter more than possessions. They value relationships over material goods. They've discovered that autonomy over their time and freedom from financial stress is worth more than a fancier lifestyle. They hit a point where they said, "This is enough," and they stopped chasing more. That contentment with enough is what creates their sense of security. They're not worried about having more because they're genuinely happy with what they have.
The $1.5 million retiree never figured out what enough looks like. There's always something more they want, some experience they feel they deserve, some purchase that will finally make them feel satisfied. They're on a hedonic treadmill where each new thing provides brief satisfaction before they're already thinking about the next thing. No amount of money will ever feel like enough because they haven't done the internal work of figuring out what they actually value and what would constitute a life well lived. They could have $3 million and they'd still feel anxious because the problem isn't the amount of money, it's their relationship with money and their inability to define enough.
This difference in mindset creates completely opposite emotional experiences despite the objective financial situations. The $800,000 retiree wakes up grateful for what they have, confident they can maintain their lifestyle indefinitely, and free from financial stress. They measure their wealth not by the balance in their account, but by their freedom, their lack of obligations, and their ability to spend their time how they choose. The $1.5 million retiree wakes up worried about whether their money will last, stressed about maintaining their lifestyle, and feeling constrained by their spending needs despite having way more money. They measure wealth by their ability to buy things and experiences, and there's always something more to buy. So there you have it, the paradox of why some $800,000 retirees feel safer than $1.5 million retirees comes down to cost of living, debt levels, housing costs, lifestyle expectations, healthcare management, investment strategy, tax efficiency, emergency preparedness, freedom from social pressure, and understanding what enough means. The person with less money made better decisions in every single one of these categories, and those decisions created financial security that the person with more money doesn't have despite their larger nest egg. The lesson here isn't that you should aim for less money in retirement. More money is obviously better than less money, all else being equal. The lesson is that how you manage your money, structure your life, and think about wealth matters just as much as the actual dollar amount in your account. You can have financial security with a modest nest egg if you make smart choices, or you can have financial anxiety with a large nest egg if you make poor choices. The choice is yours, and it's being made right now through the daily decisions you're making about spending, saving, and what kind of retirement you're building toward.